I had the fortune to be part of setting up a podcast, AIAW Podcast. Goran is the producer, and the co-hosts are me, Henrik Göthberg, and Anders Arpteg, who couldn't make it on stage today. So we thought we're going to do a podcast here on stage. So it's going to be part of the AIAW Podcast as a collaboration. And we have a fantastic guest that I want to welcome up on stage. Cassie, I can't say it right, Kozyrkov.
It's so great to be here.
Yeah, and welcome back. You
Thank
were
you
here
for having me. Yes,
keynoting. You were the number one keynote.
Me here, yeah.
And the picture is from here. Yeah, so here,
That's right.
Now, we're going to do something very interesting. The AI After Work podcast is a long format style where you can really go down rabbit holes and you can spread out. Now we're going to try to do that in 20 minutes. Let's see how that goes.
Let's see how it goes.
Like so, please.
We're spreading out down
here.
Down here. Very good.
And launching straight into it, I mean, like, I'm a big fan, and you would have been one of the top guests that we could dream of on the AI Afterward podcast. So now we made it happen. And I mean, like, you have the whole background in Google with decision science, and now you're launching out into something new and stealthy that we're soon going to know more about. But I thought we're going to have a chat. And the core topic is very simple. What do we think about generative AI, and how is that different, or how does this change your things? So what is your take on that?
Okay, so last year I talked about how the whole generative AI thing isn't an AI revolution, it's a UX revolution. And not to repeat that, I guess you could watch the recording. I also have a blog post on that. I have another little piece to add to that. I see a lot of people trying to interpret generative AI from this perspective of Gen AI or the other one. And it's very funny to me when they don't know what it's called. They're like, they're traditional, classical, discriminative, or predictive is its name. That is not the way to look at this stuff. The way to look at it is who ultimately takes responsibility for the output. So you got two choices here. You have the individual, that's your human in the loop thing, and that's your most wonderful cop-out for if a board or a senior leadership team says, go do generative AI, do the human in the loop version. That's just your standard productivity revolution. It's like, give everyone a laptop, make them responsible for what they do with the laptop. So it's either that, or it's enterprise scale AI, where the rules haven't really changed. It's kind of the same thing it always has been, except it's harder now.
Now it's harder.
It's harder.
But let's launch into that a little bit. But let's start with that topic from the core topic of value. So how do we find value in AI? And how maybe is this 2.0, or how we should think about these topics or the different types of Gen AI's use cases?
Right, so you always have to split it down that personal productivity versus enterprise scale path. And of course, it's very easy with personal productivity. Don't worry about it. Not your problem. It's your employees' problem. So, if they use it to make themselves better, great. Otherwise, sucks to be them. I say this warm-heartedly, but, this is kind of how it shakes out. When we look at enterprise scale automation, this is suddenly such a nightmare for the leader because they have to say what it means for it to work properly, what's acceptable, what's not. And if you compare it with what you were dealing with 5 years ago, 10 years ago, usually the set of possibilities for your output was just so much smaller. And if it's smaller, it's so much easier for you to say, well, okay, let's say we're doing cancer prediction. What have I got? I've got 2 potential things that my classifier could say, cancer, not cancer, and it could be right or wrong. So there I have my 2x2 table. And yes, it's actually pretty hard for a leader to say, well, this mistake is how many times worse than that mistake, but there's only 2 of them that you're valuing against one another. Now, all the possible ways that a chatbot could be wrong, how do you even begin to imagine and make statements about what's more palatable than what else? How do you score it? how do you think about performance?
Yeah, and let's dig into this topic now, right here, because it actually relates. We're going to talk about, on the opening keynote, I'm going to talk about a way to start thinking about this. Have you even thought about human agency? Mm-hmm. You know, how do we understand autonomy of our teams? So I think if you are very, you know, as a junior, you can do one task, right? I can put an agent now to do that same task. If I go to a more senior person, and they are supposed to do a task, but we know by reality, actually, you are part of a process. You need to go and talk to that person. You're part of that person. So autonomy is not anarchy. Autonomy is not that you're alone. So now these questions become super important. Where do you draw the boundaries around the AI? So all these questions becomes like what's going to hit you in the face. Are we talking about the same thing, you think?
Absolutely, but this isn't a new thing with generative AI. No. I mean, we've had this problem when we thought about how to do the ethics of self-driving cars.
Yes.
So you might build a system that, at system scale, is much, much safer than the system scale solution of letting a bunch of humans pilot these very dangerous torpedoes around at crazy speeds. I mean, if you think about what driving is. But when something goes wrong, you have an individual human that you can blame. Whereas when you build a system at scale, it now becomes very few humans' responsibility for the whole system. And so having actual human minds at every layer in the traditional way of doing things, that is human labor, human structures, human organizations, does allow you, even if you're a leader at the top, to pull out a human scapegoat. When you lose that, you have structures that we are just not used to as a society for dealing with responsibility.
Yeah. So the core topic here becomes somewhere we are starting to talk about a personal assistant. Okay, I get that. And maybe as long as I'm the human in the loop and I can use AI techniques here, that's that part. Enterprise scale, we start adding words like autonomy, right? And now what we're talking about...
I don't want to add those words.
No,
I
do that now. I do that now.
Yeah, I don't believe in that word.
Yeah, but what we are really talking about here, and I used the word before when we chatted, is the whole safety net. It's about... what is the organizational contract? What is the guardrails? And I'm not talking about fluffy stuff now. I'm talking about hardcore in the workflow. How should it work? It's just a small part here that I get that is the technical challenge. Then we need to figure out how will this fit. Is that kind of on the path?
Yeah, and I would say that I have this statement that maybe I've been using a little to annoy people, slightly spicy. I'm not sure that I believe it 100% of the way, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So feel free to misquote me on Twitter or whatever. But here we go. The safety net is actually more important than the system, than the AI system itself.
Yes.
Like when you think about the performance of the system, that's less important than the performance of the safety net. If you built a really strong safety net, you could have the shoddiest system, you would be okay. If you're trying to get an AI system that is really performant, but you're forgetting the safety nets, you hit something that I call the AI reliability paradox. I've blogged about this, where you just expect, because you've never seen a failure, that system to do really well. You haven't built any safety nets because you've never seen the failure, and then the failure gets you really painfully.
Can we exemplify what constitutes this safety net? What are we thinking about when we're saying that it's not only the system itself, but it's all the stuff around it and the safety net? Can we sort of unpack that one or two sentences?
Sure. So it's all the control logic that's usually not AI-based. Sometimes it is AI-based, but I tell leaders, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you who are engineers, you get this, but leaders don't. I tell them, when you think about AI, think about a brick wall, and there's one brick in that wall that is the actual AI piece, right? That is the patterns from data piece. The rest of the wall is what gets us to work in production. And this is also why you have systems that are foundationally similar, behaving really differently. It's all that other stuff that you don't see, the control logic, the consensus workflows, the policy layers, and so on.
Yeah, so this is massive. And we can go all the way back to the Google paper, The Technical Depth of Machine Learning, or we can go into Ali Ghodsi at Databricks. They co-wrote with Berkeley AI Research Bear on compound AI systems. And here we are talking about now a socio-technical system. We are talking about stuff, all the stuff that makes this go from a model to actually a product or a compound system is all these different things. So there's going to be a lot of software engineering. There's going to be a lot of other things in order for this to work properly. I totally agree on this. So I want to move on from that. And I want to start moving a little bit there's a big topic here, AI's impact on the job market or something like that. But I want to start on a more concrete scale. You know, what competences and skills do we need? You had some great examples and fun anecdotes thinking about that. You know, what becomes important now?
Yeah, so first, it's never been jobs, right? Never. In human history, if you think about any job, that job has changed. Pick anything. Pick writer today and writer 50 years ago, 500 years ago. These are different jobs. What technology does is it changes the nature of the tasks and the composition within the job. That's fine. That's not even that interesting or that relevant with generative AI until we start to look at where the economic impacts are hitting. And they're not hitting at the least skilled jobs. They're not hitting all the way up at the most skilled jobs. Where is it? It's like that second quartile by skill level. And what happens over there? That's where you have repetitive and digitized work. So copy-pasting type of work. That is the perfect target for automation. That all seems okay until we also realize that a lot of our paths to trust in organization, to getting folks who are straight out of school, they have no idea what they're doing, you can't take them and give them something, complicated and ethereal to do. You can't make them...
They need to get started.
Yeah, exactly. You can't trust them with creative stuff for your business. So how do you check whether their head's screwed on straight? You give them something where it's easy for you to test the answer. It's something repetitive. It's something digitized quite often. So if that's the part that we're automating, it means that the boss has the option to just do away with what you would typically have your young people, your interns do. Lovely for one generation. And then you ask yourself, where do you get the next generation of bosses?
Yeah.
Because now there isn't that path where you would be trialing out the young talent and seeing if you can trust them and giving them gradually more and more creative stuff to do. So I'm not sure how we're going to figure that part out. I've also talked a lot about, I made a new word up for this, thinking versus thunking. Thinking versus thunking. So thunk like the sound of a dull brick. I love this word. This is where you're not really engaged in the task. Like maybe we look like we're having a conversation. Maybe I'm just repeating things I've said many times. I'm not even here. I'm somewhere on another planet thinking about other stuff. There, I'm thunking. Whereas you ask me something where I have to react in the moment and I'm fully engaged, there I'm thinking. Or you're actively solving some mathematical problem versus you've already seen the solution and now you're kind of executing it. Thinking, thunking. Every job has both.
Yeah.
AI automates the thunking, not the thinking. Every job has both. But now think about, what did we learn to manage and measure and build productivity optimization for?
And how did we fine-tune our thinking through the thinking?
Right, we have no idea. There's no management science on how do you actually get your employees to be more creative. What do you do? Do you ask them to do more walks? Do you install showers at work so they can have shower thoughts? Like, how do you get people to be more creative? Whereas the thunking stuff, how many widgets did you make? Did you have your butt in the seat for 8 hours a day? Things that are easy to measure, those are the things we're going to automate.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with the rest?
But I think we had a future outlook session here this morning with Karl-Henrik Svanberg, one of the top business leaders in the world. And his take on this is that we have all these inventions coming one after another, and it looks like it's going to take off. He was at the boss of Ericsson, and in 91, they thought they could talk about what's going to happen now, but it didn't happen so fast. And his core idea here is basically, you know what, it will take a while. And I think what we are talking about here is the reason why it's going to take a while, because there are so many blind spots in all this that we haven't really understood are there. And I don't think we can even anticipate all of them until we start on the journey. So if you try to encapsulate the reasoning that we've been doing now about the other stuff than the tech, that kind of is going to be a big deal to figure out. Could you kind of sort of, what is your key sort of topics, or how would you frame that if you would need to do a PowerPoint bullets on this? Because there's a lot of thinking here, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, look, I talk about this a lot, which is that the favorite story in so many cultures is that wisher and genie story. And what's common in that story is that the wisher is too stupid to make their wish properly. Unintended consequences, over and over and over, unintended consequences. And I talk about this all the time in the AI context, but you're talking about this here in the society context. Are we smart enough to see all the complex consequences of what we're doing? No, I would rather build safety nets, right? Like, that's just my general take.
But I wouldn't call
things.
it safety nets. I would call it caring about the other stuff in the socio-technical, and the whole thing that makes that work, right? Or business. You have the tech, you have the small brick of the brick wall. And I think we are sometimes going in and staring at the one brick instead of taking a step back and asking the simple question, what are we not talking about?
Exactly. And it's safety net in the sense of, what if what I'm talking about is the wrong thing to be talking about? How about I also have a plan?
Yes.
This way and that way.
Yeah, and I like the rhetoric with safety net, because that's like a word that kind of screams risk and screams, we need to listen to this. So it forces us to not only put the spotlight on the model, but what do we need to be ready for the model, so to speak. Right. I love it. But this is a nice segue into what I think is one of your superpowers, communication, and especially communication on, math, our community, what we burn about, but speaking about it so it connects with people that are not deep into the expertise. So I want to elaborate with you, because I think this is going to be critical now. This is my segue. If we're going to go away from only talking about the technology, but talking about the safety net, we kind of need to get these different communities to meet and learn and listen to each other. And then they need to be better, but at least us working with the AI needs to be way better at communicating in order to hit their turf. So can we talk about, communication and, how did you get that good? And how are you thinking about communicating yourself?
Oh, sure. I mean, I'll tell you guys the instant secret. It's called practice. That's the actual secret. But the longer thing is, this community, my community, data people, STEM people, math people, when you go to a bunch of poets, let's say, you'll say, I am a mathematician. They will react with, respect, right? Quite often. And then when you go to this community and you talk about poetry or art, something else like that, this community thinks, poetry.
We are quite techy. We're engineers, right? So we are very, very proud engineers, and we have a hard time seeing how this fluffy stuff can help us.
Yeah, fluffy stuff. So first, when I hear the term soft skills, I hate that term. Let me remind you guys what soft skills are. I say this a lot. Soft skills are the skills that are hardest to automate. Yes. If all you got is hard skills, good luck to you. You're first. But now think about poetry versus math. You know how to do the one. Why don't you go try the other? You think it's so easy, the fluffy stuff? You may well find that it is a lot harder than you think. And how I ended up learning this stuff is I went and tried things, and I was appalled at how difficult it was, so I got better and better. In college, I had a writing class that I was used to A's, A pluses. I got a C+ with infinite rewrites allowed. It took me 50 plus rewrites to get that A because I had no idea how to write. Well, practice makes perfect. So go try it, do it a whole bunch. For that, you need to learn to potentially respect the other side, not dismiss it as, oh, fluffy. Because you guys like distributions? Don't judge a distribution by its lowest exemplar. Right? If you have a very high variance distribution with a very, very low barrier to entry, but the heights are really high, and you judge them by the lowest exemplars, you're not going to understand how difficult it is to get to the top. Whereas some of these very technical disciplines, there's a higher barrier to entry, but the amount of virtuosity isn't that much, right? So you're nested inside much larger distribution. Go try, go aim at the top, see if you hit it.
But one thing you told me before that really hit home is how the memory works and how, you're trying to memorize something and that is easy, versus memorizing about stuff you don't know about. I think this is a super good topic around communication.
Yeah. So I've been interested in human decision-making for a very large chunk of my life. And so as part of that, I went to grad school for psychology and neuroscience. And you get to work on clinical research studies. and they are very, very strict at excluding groups from the criteria who would show very weird results, right? They're like, we are only studying right-handed people. We will not study left-handed people. Our results are for right-handed only. Now imagine if there's a study on attention and memory, and mathematicians were special somehow. They'd be excluded, but hey, they're not. They come into the lab, they perform like everybody else on working memory, attention, normal memory stuff. So they're not better at memory and attention. So what do we know about memory and attention? Well, with working memory, you start loading the brain with more and more new bits of information, and you have to keep carrying that. It overwhelms you, and you forget what you're dealing with. Where am I getting to? In a typical mathematics lecture, where someone starts writing on the board, let alpha be this, and let beta be that, and let gamma be that, and they've defined a whole lot of symbols, and they've done a bunch of equations with them, and then they've wiped off the board, or they've gone next slide. That is not physically possible for you to have paid attention to and remembered. It's a magic trick. The people who are following it are people who have seen it before. And yet, we poor nerds, we just don't fess up. We're like, oh no, maybe I'm stupid. You're not stupid. Whoever is lecturing also doesn't understand that there are people in the room for whom this is new, and they are not letting you gently follow along. To communicate well, here's my fun trick. Pick an alphabet that you don't know. Egyptian hieroglyphics. Take your mathematics talk, slides, lecture, and replace every symbol, with some hieroglyph. Now try teach it. And if you get stuck, your audience is not going to follow it at all. Give yourself a budget. Max 3 new things if you're going to be gentle to your audience. Not define all this stuff. Okay, you guys got it? Okay, erase it and off we go.
Yeah, and what I get out of that is really, if we talk in one lingo and we have all these words, and we're going now to bosses or the business, and they have a completely different lingo,
they
cannot have an attention span for what we are talking about. So the trick is here, they have attention span if I talk in their lingo. So this core bottom line is that I really need to be really, really good at taking my math stuff and talk about it in a way that their attention span works. It's not smartness, it's not memory, it's just how the brain functions.
Exactly. We are all the same, and it is all about language. So who are you talking to? What language do they already have? And when we use symbols with people who have used them a lot, that's not in working memory, that's in long-term memory. So statisticians in the room, when I say X with a bar on top, all of you know that's an average. Those are not statisticians. You haven't used that over and over. So if I put that on the slide and I quickly said average and then I moved on, that would lose you. It's on me as a communicator to think about what you might know and err on the side of the more common language if possible. And I think that's a great habit for this community.
And with this, the streaming has ended. So in one way, we're done. Do you want to keep going like the private chats? So this is how we do AI after work. It's the same. So we have for 2 hours we've been doing it.
Wait, we're going for 2 more hours?
2 hours long format. But the good thing is, what happens is after 2 hours we turn off the camera, and you know what? It's the next 2 hours that's even better.
Okay.
So that's what I'm thinking here. So we turn off the camera now. The AI after work is done, but we are now sitting here chatting. Don't mind about them. Don't mind about them. So I'm going to ask you now the more philosophical question, at least one. And now we're off camera.
You didn't warn me.
No, I didn't warn you.
Okay.
That's the whole point. We never warn our guests that we always turn off the camera and then we keep chatting. So one final question off camera. How do you think about an AGI future?
I could have done this one on camera.
No.
Okay, guys, you got to define stuff. And if you don't define stuff, then what are we all talking about? Like, I am so amazed by a community that understands that at the top of its page, if it says, I'm going to use X, and you've got your X, and I've got my X, they might not be the same X, so let's not have an argument about them, right? We get that. Same community, we use a fancier word, and we get ourselves all riled up about it without having at the top of the page, let AGI equals. Let AGI equals, guys. I actually am not sufficiently interested in science fiction. I love science fiction. I read science fiction, but I'm not sufficiently interested in science fiction to get into the weeds of AGI. What a kind of useless term. Like, give me one that helps humanity. What, are we talking about multimodality? That's going to be a very different answer from what else? Singularity? What the hell is that, guys? Like, seriously, write it at the top of the page in a way that everyone would agree, and then we can have a conversation about it.
And you, in one way, you avoided the topic, where's the AI future? In the other way, you are pointing again at what should we really be talking about? Should we spend so much time on talking about, AI doomer stuff over here, or do we have real problems to talk about here right now? So
it's the thing with the AGI stuff is, I don't know, is it like our need to be impressed by things? Are we really asking, like, when are we going to be impressed? Let me tell you, progress is incremental. And there are very few instances where it isn't, and that's where you're impressed. Chances are that we kind of gradually roll up to it. And if we haven't, it's maybe because all of a sudden something went to users in the way that ChatGPT went to users 6 years after, or how many years? 2004 years after the paper. You missed out on it for 4 years. Like that wasn't an all-at-once surprise. If you were watching from the start, progress is super incremental, and it will continue to be incremental. And we'll get to something that we today would have called AGI. Incrementally, no one will be impressed, and they'll keep asking about some other AGI out there.
I will test something. On the podcast, we have actually had that as this final question, trying to paint the picture. Do you foresee, or what do you envision if you dream or philosophize? Do we live in utopia, in abundance, or did everything go to shit, or the Terminator scenario? And then we kind of asked the guest, where on the spectrum are you? The interesting topic now that has come up more and more that I say is like, okay, it's more about the incremental stuff. It's not about the big bang on this or this. It's about how do we manage the journey there. And so the more and more the statistics that we have is that, well, kind of in the middle, kind of not big bang, super fast takeoff, but something that kind of will build, and we will kind of, I guess that definition was AGI we passed a year ago. I kind of missed it because we used abstracting away to bigger problems. Where would you put yourself on that scale? Or, you know, so that was the summary of like 100 guests on this question.
I would say that when people ask me whether I'm scared about AI, I say no, I'm scared of human negligence. And there is potential for human negligence at scale, which motivates me to do what I do, which is to think about how human decisions at scale could be smarter, how we could have better skills when we take responsibility for a very large impact on this world. That said, we do have better outcomes as a group, right? Like a world with one laughing supervillain left on it is in nobody's best interest. Sorting things out, using resources wisely for us as a group, getting along together is kind of in everybody's best interest. And there is a lot of technology that's going to help that. And as we go on, we figure out how to do things better, more efficiently. We all benefit from it. There may be little wobbles, but I do not see any kind of apocalyptic Terminator type of scenarios. I imagine we're going to figure out how to do things better. And life will approximately move in a good direction.
And I think that's the perfect end note. For we had something on camera, and we got to have the after work, as we call it. Thank you so much, Cassie.
Thank you. This was fun.